Hey everyone, Bryan here. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Today, I'm going to share with you some thoughts I have on the concept of lists. Yes, lists, those boring things that you buy for $7 on Fiverr and you get the perfect buyer persona. And the reality of it is that's crap. Those lists are garbage. And why are they garbage? We're going to dig into that. So why are so-called purchase lists garbage? Well, they're not garbage, but you got to make them better. So the difference between how I approach list building and how most do, it's because of this rule. I was reminded of it with Brian Kurtz a few weeks ago at the mastermind at the Grand Floridian in Florida with Vance Morris, my friend who runs the Alliance. And Brian reminded us that in his world, he's a self-proclaimed list guy. He managed one of the largest mailing lists ever. He grew up through the list business. That was his business, to build, manage, and procure and partner with right brands to build the right lists. And so he challenged the concept of this idea of 40, 40, 20. And for those that don't know it, the common marketing lore is that 40% of your sales come from a good list, 40% come from a good offer, and 20% come from the fantastic copy. And while big established brands are always messing with controls and messing with other factors, we won't talk about offers today. We'll talk about that on another case. But one thing you can control is lists. And what people think they need lists of 10,000 people when they really don't. What they need is highly engaged buyers who fit their perfect customer persona. What does that perfect future customer look like? Well, if they are business owners with 12 to 15 employees who have a regional business where they do distribution of products and services to large Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 companies in a 150-mile radius of their businesses, that's much better than I sell parts to manufacturers, right? That is totally a different mindset. And when you think about minor changes, and Bryan went so far to saying it's really 41, 39, 20, that he's just saying that he, because of his experience, is overemphasizing the value of the lists. And I got to tell you, at least for today, I'm going to share that fact that I think he's right. I think the list is so incredibly important. Why do I know that? Because we spend a ton of time curating not only who are the right people for lists, but actually understanding who are the wrong people and why we shouldn't be wasting those precious resources. You know, Kennedy talks about this idea of you don't necessarily need to market harder. You need to create what's called a market to message match. And that market is, who are those perfect customers? Understanding that quality of the match is so important. And that's why sometimes it feels easy and sometimes it feels hard. Now, if you're led to believe that, Facebook and Google in their altruistic algorithms are going to help you find those people without making money, you're completely wrong. They are going to help you make money. I went to Dan's last live event probably 7 or 8 years ago, just before he got sick. And it was called Mailbox Millions 2.0. And people were like, how can I find people that own a business that got divorced, that belong to a country club in my town? And he goes, you got to do it yourself. You got to put on a pair of boots. You got to put on a pair of gloves and a pair of coveralls and do the work. And she's like, well, how can I do that? And he goes, I don't know. Maybe you could identify the people by going to the club and sitting in the parking lot. Maybe you could pull divorce records of current divorce stuff from the public records. Maybe you could find the fact of the business registrations and try to puzzle those pieces together. And then, well, I don't have time to do that. And his response was, sitting doing the fireside chat, is you don't have time not to do it. Because if you can't identify your perfect future customer, you're going to be doomed and you're going to spend a ton of money figuring that out. I know what my demographic looks like. I know what my customer's demographic looks like. I know what our partners' demographics look like. So it's unbelievable. You've heard me talk about Pam's business. We can tell you exactly, how many houses they have or have had at one time, what types of cars they drive, where they like to vacation. I mean, it's unbelievable how much you can learn from people, that knowing that people that have third homes, they have 2 to 3 cars in their quote unquote forever home here in Naples. One of them is a fabulous car that you would think they'd be driving, but the other one's a 15-year-old BMW 7 Series they've had for forever. And the other one's a minivan that they've had for 25 years. I mean, seriously, like, these folks have they have very, very similar characteristics. At one point, I think every one of her clients was driving like 15 or 20-year-old German cars as their primary vehicles. Now, we would see them sneaking in the Bentley or the Porsche in there because, hey, you got it, might as well use it, right? So, but that's how important understanding the list is. Because if you don't know what your farm plot looks like, how do you know what to plant? And if you think of the plant concept, that's your offer. Another great analogy to use is Gary Halbert, right? So what people don't know Gary, but stuff that people are teaching his things. He has this concept called the starving crowd, excuse me. He doesn't want 20,000 people who like cheeseburgers. He wants 200 people who want cheeseburgers right now, because people that are actively looking for your product and service are going to be significantly easier and less expensive to go through. Now, remember, these guys cut their teeth on mail. So mail is way more expensive than emails, but we think because emails are quote unquote free that we can use them without veil. And the reality of it is that it's really not free, because now you have to have your ESP, your email service provider, has to make you authenticate your stuff a million ways. You have to have proper documentation of where your business is a million ways. You have to understand about deliverability to different mailboxes at different times a million ways, where postcard just sent in the mail, right? So that's why we talk about multi-channel, multi-touch, because it reacts to those people that are in the market significantly better. So, it's don't just start with the copy, but start with the hunger and the crowd. It's so much easier to focus on 200 or 300 people than it is to really focus on 20,000. And then if you think about once they do raise their hand, right? So if they do that, we got to talk to them. We got to talk to them in a consistent basis. We can't just do it once, right? So you have this fantastic list. That's what's great about fantastic lists of small, interested people, that you don't need to have this massive audience to drive people through it, because you want to move people along the emotional roller coaster to get to know you. They talk today about the average consumer has to consume 7 to 10 hours of your stuff before they buy from you. Think about it. It's like a 7-Eleven, 7 places, 11 hours. That's insane, but it's probably true. I know that people I talk to that listen to the podcast, they don't just listen to the podcast. They see my posts and my comments on LinkedIn. They probably have met me somewhere along the lines and or have been referred to me by someone who knows me or works with me. So now all of a sudden they get to hear my voice. They get to understand where I'm coming from, because I have a specific way of doing things and not everyone agrees. And hey, that's great. But if you understand how important the list is and how important that target is, you're going to make your hunting so much easier. If you have to be in the small market, here's the real rub though. This is why I think there's a lot of road noise today. If you have a small market, they have to trust you. It has to be you in front of the camera, doing more of it. We're still using the cartoons. They've been fantastic. I don't have a brand cartoon, but we will. But understanding like they have to trust you. You have to be able to look them in the eye. And while nothing beats face-to-face and in-person stuff, Zoom isn't bad, although I'm getting tired of it. We've been doing Zoom calls for 6 or 7 years. But in the nature of my business, I do Zoom calls with Europe. I do calls with Asia and the Philippines on a consistent basis. And it makes it so much easier when you can look people in the eye and say, hey, where are we at with this? So don't be afraid to focus on small and focus on authenticity and focus on trust. Because, they say data is the new oil, but it's really not. It's been around forever, right? So it's not this new concept. Now, what I will share with you, you can't just have small lists. If you use those tools I mentioned, Facebook, Google, for retargeting, for authenticity purposes, they are fantastic resources, because you have to think about, we have this giant ocean, right? And that's this big reach, but we really just want to have a small farm. And that small farm can be incredibly valuable. Don't equate small to not incredibly valuable, right? So if your market, let's just say there's 5,000 potential buyers in your market, and you think you deserve to do business with, 2,000 of them, that's crazy. Maybe you can be doing business with, 100 or 200 of them and sell more value to them, right? That's incredibly, incredibly important. Because what happens is that the ones that have let's say the goal of there's 5,000 and they want to do business with all the 5,000, they're probably going very, very shallow rather than deep. Well, Brian, well, wait a second. You talk about small lists. Well, why would I want to do that? Well, I got to tell you, I'm going to share with you my opinion. My opinion is if you go deep, it's much more hard to break that bond, right? Because now all of a sudden, you're not just touching one part of their business or through your products or services. You have a chance to dig into multiple areas. And while, that people say, well, that's a risk from both parties because what happens if something happens? And that reality, that does happen. But the real thinking of it as me being selfish is that it makes it simpler to grow and scale. Because if you think of what I wrote about in my book, it's meaningful scale, right? Meaningful scale is different for all people. So if you're a coach trying to sell a $29 program to people that are interested in learning about AI, you're going to have to go out to a broad sense of people. But I will tell you one of the things we are looking at is how do I work with industrial distribution companies with their marketing and sales teams so they can use AI to give their salespeople an edge so they can become more educated and more aware and more responsible for micro learning that is specific to them. So if I have a customer that's in industry X, why do I want to give them case studies on industry Y? I want to go to my AI engine and say, help me qualify what we're doing for this specific person and this thing. And let's drop a little 1 or 2 pager. That's where AI is as of today. Again, March of 2026. It allows you to do that. But I can't do that for everybody. I guess you could. Theoretically, you could do that for everybody. But again, are you going to get their attention? Are you going to get their engagement? Are you going to get their opportunity for business? So small list, highly targeted, highly coveted, highly personal, and highly effective. So hope that's well. So, someone said this, I read this, I'm not sure where, they talked about the first sale comes from relevance, right? So today's world, you know this, 80% of who you're talking to has already basically decided what they're doing by the time they talk to you. They've already done research on you. They've already decided they need your products and services. And the real rub is how do you get to the second list, right? The second one comes from trust. They trust you. The third one comes from systems, right? So if you're not doing the work and you don't use automation and teams to make sure the things that the extra sales happen, it's probably because you don't have a system. So if you think about it, right? So if you want to concentrate your marketing power in any one way, it doesn't matter how big your business are, whether you're a one-man band or a $100 million business, whoever's driving the conversation to start with, you got to start with the list. We work with people where the list is the outside sales reps are out driving around. And while I don't think pictures of trucks driving around is the best thing, it's better than nothing. But if you add 10 to 12 people a week, a month, a quarter that are highly targeted to your customer acquisition funnel, and more importantly, your referral acquisition funnel, you're going to find your investment payback in spades. So anyway, hope that was helpful. I just wanted to go on a little bit of a rant talking about the lists. And that the list doesn't need to be 100,000 names. You're probably going to find, no matter the size of your list, somewhere between 10 and 20% of those are active buyers. And active buyers meaning they buy from you more than once over a period of time. Every every business is different. If you sell services, if you sell products, if you're a distribution, if it's a consumable, if it's a capital item, right? Whatever it is, they all have the same basics structure. The reason why it's called the Pareto optimality frontier, right? I think that's what it's called, or the 80-20 rule, is because 80% of your value comes from 20% of your efforts, or 20% of your efforts create 80% of your value, however you want to think about it. But that's the reality. If you look at your customer list, I pretty much can guarantee that it's the same thing. You're going to have a handful at the very, very top, handful at the very bottom, a bunch in the middle, and so on and so forth. So do the math, figure it out, and start working on your list. Thanks again. Looking forward to having you on the next podcast, and we'll talk to you soon.